I learned to open and close drawers without making a sound, to walk the creaky hallway without a single floorboard groaning beneath my steps. I got A's in school because it made things easier. Not praise, necessarily, but fewer conversations. If I didn't cause problems, I wasn't a problem. In Wonderland, my parents spent a week building cardboard mushrooms and painting roses red. I was assigned to help with the curtains backstage. I remember peeking through the slit during rehearsal, watching Madison twirl in her sky blue dress. She was magnetic. That night, as they celebrated with ice cream and photos, I sat by the window upstairs and read Anne of Green Gables under a blanket. Anne had red hair and too many feelings, but she also had people who saw her. I read the same chapters 3 times. As we got older, nothing changed, only got more subtle. Madison bloomed. She went from ballet to volleyball to student council. Our mom became her unpaid campaign manager. Our dad kept a camcorder long after it was cool, documenting every speech and performance like she was destined for something big. And me, I edited her campaign flyers, quietly, carefully. By the time I left for college, I wasn't sad, I didn't even cry. I waved goodbye, loaded my boxes into the back of a friend's car, and felt something close to relief. In college, people asked me questions and waited for answers. That felt revolutionary. Years passed, I moved across the country. Got a job in publishing. I fell in love with a woman named Clara who said I had the softest voice she'd ever heard, like a library on a rainy day. We lived in a quiet apartment with a view of a dog park. For the first time, I felt like someone saw me, even the parts I thought weren't worth showing. Then, last month, Madison called. "Mom's sick," she said. Her voice cracked. "It's bad." I hadn't spoken to Madison in nearly 4 years. The last time was a clipped exchange at Thanksgiving after she joked, "Lily always was the quiet one." Like background music, and I had smiled too quickly and excused myself. But now she was crying and something in me cracked too. I flew home the next day. The house smelled the same: lemon furniture polish and faint laundry detergent. Madison greeted me at the door with dark circles under her eyes and a nervous hug. My father looked older, smaller somehow. Mom was in bed, pale. Her voice was weak but unmistakably her. "Lily," she whispered, like she was surprised I'd come, like it was an act of great generosity. I stayed for 3 days, long days filled with microwaved soup, short silences, and the strange choreography of 2 adult daughters trying to share a kitchen. On the last night, Madison and I sat on the porch. We hadn't done that since we were teenagers. She passed me a glass of wine. "I used to be jealous of you, you know." I laughed before I could stop myself. "What? You always seemed so self-contained. Like you didn't need any of us." I looked out at the lawn. "I did," I said. "I just stopped showing it." She didn't answer right away. Then, "I think Mom didn't know how to love more than one person at a time." That sentence settled between us like dust. We didn't fix anything that night. But it felt like the first honest moment we'd ever shared. And maybe that was something. Now, back in my apartment, I keep the porch light on. A small ritual, I don't know why. Maybe because I'm starting to believe I can be seen and still be safe. Clara brings me tea. She presses her forehead to mine. "You okay?" "Getting there," I say, and I am. At college, people noticed when I spoke. Not always with applause, but they noticed. That alone felt miraculous. I kept my head down and filled my days with reading, writing, and early morning walks to the library. I didn't go to parties, didn't rush a sorority, didn't do anything that felt like a necessary noise. Freedom was enough. In my sophomore year, I met Nate. He was kind in a way I didn't trust at first. He listened. He remembered small things, like how I only drank coffee if there was cinnamon in it, or how I hated fluorescent lights because they reminded me of my childhood kitchen. But the first time he said, "You matter," I froze. Because part of me still didn't believe it. We dated for 2 years. He met my silence with patience and my doubts with steady presence. But when he talked about building a life together, kids, holidays, family dinners, I pulled away. I didn't know how to explain that the word family didn't feel like safety to me. It felt like a test I had already failed. I ended things one cold December morning before Christmas break. He cried. I didn't. My heart had long ago learned how to survive its own storms. After graduation, I moved to Chicago, small apartment, low-paying job, but it was mine. I sent holiday cards to my parents every year, brief ones. They never replied, but that was fine. I didn't need replies. And then, last month, out of nowhere, an email from Madison. Subject line, "Can we talk?" At first, I ignored it, old instincts. But curiosity pulled me back. She called the next day. Her voice was softer than I remembered, heavier. She said Mom had a stroke. That Dad was barely coping, that she felt alone. I know I don't have the right to ask, she said, but I'm asking anyway. Something strange happened in me then, not forgiveness, not yet. But the walls I'd built over decades cracked just slightly. I took a week off work and flew home. The house hadn't changed much, same floral curtains. Same hallway where I used to sneak past like a ghost. My father looked shocked to see me. He hugged me awkwardly, no apology, just, you've grown up. Mom was thinner, paler, she could barely speak. She gripped my hand with surprising strength. I looked at her, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel anger, I felt tired and free. Madison and I stayed up late that first night. She cried a little. I didn't. She told me she had no idea how hard it had been for me. That she thought I wanted to be left alone. I told her the truth about the pain, the loneliness. The hunger, literal and not. She didn't defend our parents. She just said, I'm sorry, Lily, I really am. We didn't become best friends overnight, but we started something. A bridge, maybe, one plank at a time. When I left a week later, Madison hugged me, long and tight. I hugged back. Before I got into the taxi, my dad came out to the porch. He handed me a folded piece of paper. I opened it in the car. It was one of my childhood stories, the one that won the prize. The paper was worn, yellowed, but intact. In shaky handwriting at the bottom, he'd written, "You are always brilliant." I just didn't know how to show it, Dad. I cried then for everything I got too late. And everything I was finally ready to let go. Back in Chicago, I framed that story. Hung it above my desk. I still write, not for applause, not for them. But for the little girl who drew blue horses and believed in magic before anyone told her not to. She deserves a voice, and I'm done being silent. Carol didn't smile, she didn't hug me. She simply said, we need to talk, now. I followed her down the hall, heels clicking on marble, past a wall of framed photographs, every one of Madison, of course. None of me, not even as children. The room she led me to was dimly lit, quiet, and smelled faintly of perfume and something colder, like old secrets. She closed the door behind us. Madison needs a favor, she said without even sitting down. Of course, what kind of favor? I asked, already knowing I wouldn't like the answer. She folded her arms. Logan comes from a prominent family. They're private, conservative, very image conscious, and they'll be doing background checks. Madison's worried. Well, we're all worried about certain things. I stared at her. What things? Your lifestyle, she said, carefully, like the word was poisoned. Living alone, not married, no clear social life. You're a very private person, and sometimes that can raise questions. My blood ran cold. So you want me to lie? I asked. She didn't answer. She didn't have to. She handed me a script, yes, an actual script of answers I was expected to give if anyone from Logan's family asked me about myself. I skimmed it. It was absurd. It said I had a boyfriend in finance. That I worked in hospital outreach and volunteered on weekends at a church. That I was very traditional at heart, despite my intense focus on studies in the past. I looked up at her. You want me to erase myself? Carol's lips tightened. Don't be dramatic. We're just asking you to support your sister. Just this once. Support, that word again. I folded the paper, then tore it down the middle. Carol flinched. Madison's marrying a man who'll only accept her if I pretend to be someone else, I said. That's not love, that's performance. Her voice turned sharp. Don't ruin this for her, Lily, for once, don't make this about you. I laughed, a bitter, hollow laugh. It's never been about me. I walked out. I didn't stay for the champagne toast. I didn't wait to see if Madison would come looking. She didn't. I drove home in silence, gripping the steering wheel like it was the only solid thing in the world. That night, I opened a bottle of wine and stared at the cherry tree outside my kitchen window. Its branches were bare. It was too early for blossoms. But I knew they were coming. 2 weeks later, I got a call. From Logan, not Madison, not Carol, Logan. His voice was tight, formal. Hi, Lily, I wanted to clarify something. Okay, I said, heart thudding. He cleared his throat. You didn't show up in any of the photos Madison said she had with you. And the story she told about your life, it didn't match your LinkedIn. So I did some digging. My mouth went dry. I just want to ask one thing, he continued. Are you and Madison even close? There it was, the beginning of the unraveling. No, I said, we're not. We never were. A pause. Thank you, he said, and hung up. 3 days later, the engagement was called off. Madison didn't reach out. Carol didn't either. but an old mutual friend from high school sent me a message. "What did you do? Madison's wedding is off. Her mom is going ballistic." And for once, I didn't feel guilty, I didn't feel anything. Because I hadn't done anything wrong. I had simply told the truth. A month passed, spring arrived. The cherry tree bloomed soft pink and fragile yet defiantly alive. I sat on the balcony one morning, coffee in hand, watching the petals drift like confetti. My phone buzzed, a text, unknown number. "Lily, I don't know what to say. I messed up, I hurt you, I was selfish. I get it if you never want to speak to me again. But I miss you, I do, Madison." I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I locked the phone, not out of anger. Not revenge, just peace, because I finally knew I didn't need an apology to heal. I didn't need a sister to stand taller. I had built a life with my own hands, brick by brick, against every gust of cold wind they send my way. And now I could breathe. I drove home in silence, the road lit by streaks of passing headlights. The farther I got from that mansion, the lighter my chest felt, like each mile peeled off another invisible weight I'd been dragging since childhood. At home, I took off my shoes, poured a glass of water, and sat by the cherry tree window. The house was quiet, mine, still mine. The next morning, the text started coming. "Don't let bitterness make you do something you'll regret. Families forgive each other, but we need to move past this." From Harold, "You disappointed me today. Not because you said no, but because of how coldly you did it." From Madison again, "Logan's family noticed. You made it awkward, he's upset. We might have to postpone the wedding now, are you happy?" They weren't texts. They were guilt grenades. I muted them all. That week, I buried myself in work. I put in long hours, stayed late at the lab, and avoided anything that reminded me of them. I told myself they'd get bored eventually. That they'd move on, find some other angle to spin, but I underestimated them. 2 weeks later, I received a letter in the mail, certified, legal stationery. It was a formal request, not a subpoena, not quite a threat, but a pressure tactic. Madison and Logan were inquiring about the potential for shared property interests in my house. The letter was worded carefully, politely, but it rattled me. I called the lawyer I'd used during the house closing. She read the letter and sighed. "They're trying to scare you," she said. "It has no legal standing, you own the house free and clear. But they're hoping you'll panic." I didn't panic, I documented everything. Every message, every veiled comment. Every suggestion that tried to make me smaller, then I blocked them all. Phone, email, even social media, though I barely used it. I erased their access to me digitally and emotionally. Because sometimes survival means going no contact. 3 months passed. No word from them. For the first time in years, I felt the absence of drama like fresh air. In June, the cherry tree exploded with blossoms. Pink, bright, and unapologetically alive. One Saturday morning, I hosted a small brunch, just a few colleagues and friends. We sat outside, laughing, drinking iced tea with mint. They passed around a fruit tart I made, and someone said, "Lily, your home is so peaceful." I smiled. "It is, I fought for it." Later, one of them asked if I had any siblings. I paused. "Yes," I said. "But I don't see her much," and that was enough. In August, I received one last letter, handwritten, no return address. "Lily, you made your choice. I hope you sleep well at night knowing you abandoned your family. Madison is devastated, but don't worry. We won't bother you again. We know where we stand, Carol." I read it once, then folded it neatly and placed it in the shredder. That night, I lit a candle on the balcony, not for grief, for closure. And as the wind carried the scent of cherry blossoms and warm summer air, I realized something. I hadn't lost a family, I had found myself. While I lay in the under dim fluorescent lights, the shock wore off and something else settled in, clarity. For the first time in my life, everyone saw what they really were. There was no room for gaslighting, no whisper campaign to smear me as dramatic, bitter, or ungrateful. This wasn't an emotional wound they could pretend didn't exist. There was blood, police reports, witnesses. Later that night, a detective came by to take my statement. I told her everything about the wedding, the fight, the long pattern of coercion and manipulation. I didn't dramatize, I didn't soften. I just said no, I finished, and they couldn't stand it. She looked at me, then nodded slowly. "You did the right thing, you'll need a lawyer. Their charges are serious and this will go public soon." By the time I returned home 2 days later, the news had already broken. Local bride's parents arrested after assaulting sister at wedding. A clip from a guest's phone was circulating online. You couldn't see the blow itself, but you heard the scream, the chaos, the shriek of glass under someone's heels as they ran. I didn't watch it. I didn't need to. Logan reached out once, just once, a long text, mostly apologies. He said he called off the honeymoon. Said he was reevaluating everything. Madison never reached out. But her silence was louder than any scream. They were claiming I had exaggerated what happened. That I caused a scene, that I provoked Harold. The same man caught on camera holding the blooded cake base. I laughed when I read it. Laughed so hard I cried. My lawyer did not laugh. This is retaliation, she said. And we'll fight it, but it'll be long and ugly. I nodded, so be it. It dragged for months, depositions, character witnesses. My college professors wrote letters about my discipline, colleagues testified to my work ethic. A retired neighbor even described how often I mowed my own lawn. Their side had nothing, no proof, just entitlement wrapped in wounded pride. A family that couldn't believe the puppet had cut her strings. Madison showed up to court wearing white. She cried on the stand, said she only wanted a family that loved each other. That I misunderstood everything, but the prosecution played the video. Read the text messages, showed the arrest records. Brought up the report, the judge didn't look moved. In the end, the lawsuit was thrown out. My father pled guilty to assault with a weapon. Got 6 months in county jail and court-mandated anger management. My mother, charged with obstruction and harassment. Community service and probation. Madison, she was last seen leaving court with a scarf around her face, avoiding reporters. The day after the verdict, I returned to the cherry tree. It was late fall. The blossoms were gone. But the branches stood tall, bare, honest, unafraid to be seen without decoration. I sat under it with a cup of tea, legs tucked under me, watching the golden leaves fall. I didn't feel joy, not yet. But I did feel peace. They had tried to take everything. My work, my home, my name, and still, here I was. Whole, alive, a noun. That was the last chapter they'd ever write in my story. From now on, I hold the pen. The shift in the room was palpable, a ripple of disbelief spreading through the crowd as Logan's parents, usually the calm, polite anchors of the evening, snapped under the weight of the truth. The perfect, gleaming world Madison had carefully curated came apart at the seams, revealing a much darker, more twisted reality. The guests, who had once congratulated her on her engagement, now looked at her like a stranger. Logan stood frozen, torn between loyalty to the woman he was about to marry and the realization that everything he thought he knew about her and her family was a lie. His eyes darted between Madison, who was now sobbing, and his parents, who had made it clear that this was not just an act of violence, but a moral breaking point. He finally spoke, but his voice cracked. Madison, is this the truth? Did you know about all of this? Madison's gaze dropped and she wiped her tears with trembling hands. She nodded, but it wasn't the resolute nod of someone owning up to their actions. It was the look of someone terrified of losing everything, the perfect life, the perfect image. I knew they were difficult, she stammered, trying to hold herself together. But I didn't think it would go this far. I never thought double quotes, you never thought? Dean interjected, his voice growing louder, more incredulous. You knew your father had a violent temper. You saw the way they treated Lily, and you stayed quiet because you didn't want your wedding day ruined. Madison's mouth opened, but no words came out. She was crumbling, the illusion of the fairy tale wedding shattered, and with it, the image of the perfect sister, the perfect daughter. All of it unraveled. Logan finally turned his back on her, his expression unreadable. He strode over to the entrance of the venue, where a police officer was still on the phone, confirming the situation with the hospital. Logan, usually composed, was a storm of disbelief and disappointment. Logan, please, Madison pleaded, her voice breaking as she ran after him. Logan, don't do this, I love you, please. I didn't want any of this, don't leave me. He stopped, his back still turned, his body rigid. But there was no softening in his stance, the anger, the betrayal, it was all too much. He turned around, his face pale, eyes dark with a mix of hurt and confusion. I need time to think, he said, his voice low, strained. I need to understand what the hell just happened. As he walked away, leaving Madison standing in the center of the room, it felt like the last thread of hope in her perfect life snapped. The guests, once sympathetic to her, now turned their backs one by one, muttering under their breaths, some gathering their things to leave. The harsh light of truth, shining in the space where once only glossy smiles and high expectations had been, made it clear, the wedding was over, but so was Madison's carefully constructed world. By the time I was released from the hospital, the fallout had already started to take shape. Madison's parents, facing charges, would never again hold the same influence in her life. Her social circle, her support system, had evaporated. The guests who once flattered her now avoided her. Madison tried calling me twice, but I ignored both texts and voicemails. She had shown who she truly was, and there was nothing left to salvage. As I sat on my back porch, the air crisp with the early fall breeze, the quiet seemed almost oppressive. The cherry tree outside, bare and stripped of its blooms, mirrored my feeling, raw, exposed, and alone. But I wasn't truly alone, not anymore. My phone buzzed. A text from Logan, just 2 words, "I'm sorry." For a second, I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. I thought about replying, about letting him off the hook, about finding a way to forgive him. But then I remembered the hospital room, the sound of my parents' voices rising, and Harold's hand gripping the cake stand like it was the only thing that could hold his rage. I remembered Madison standing in her white dress, as though nothing had ever been wrong. No, I wasn't the one who needed to apologize. I didn't respond. Instead, I walked outside and knelt beneath the cherry tree, my fingers grazing the branches. I wasn't the same person who had walked into that wedding a few weeks ago. And for the first time in my life, I knew I wasn't going to let anyone tell me who I should be. Logan stayed with me in silence for a few moments, the weight of his decision hanging between us. There was no rush for words. No need to explain the obvious. He was no longer a part of that world, but neither was I. The bouquet of purple dahlias lay in his hands like a symbol of lost promises, the kind of gesture that might have meant something brighter in a different world. I looked at the flowers, the deep, vibrant purple, a stark contrast to the heavy weight in the room. They were beautiful, but they didn't erase what had happened. Nothing could. He shifted in his seat, his voice breaking the silence. "Lily, I don't know how to fix this, or if I even can. But I won't pretend like it's just about me and Madison anymore." I swallowed hard. "You don't owe me an explanation, Logan." He looked at me sharply, his gaze soft but intense. "I do owe you one, Lily. I failed you. I saw everything and I should have acted sooner. But I kept telling myself it wasn't that bad. I kept ignoring what I knew deep down was wrong." "I know," I replied quietly, my voice barely above a whisper. "But you're right, it's not just about the wedding. It's about everything I've ever been, how they've treated me, how they've treated us." Logan looked away for a moment, the strain in his eyes clear. "I don't want to be a part of that world anymore. You deserve so much better, Lily. You deserve someone who stands by you, who sees the truth of it all." His words, though sincere, felt like a balm to a wound that had already been cut deep. I nodded slowly, still processing the shift in my life, the world I'd known for so long, the one that revolved around my parents, my sister, and the expectations that bound us all was collapsing. I had no control over it, but I could choose how I moved forward. I couldn't undo the damage. I couldn't erase the years of hurt, the cruel and suffocating love they'd tried to give. But I didn't need to carry it with me anymore. "I'm glad you're here, Logan, but you're right, I can't go back to that life. I can't pretend that everything will be okay just because Madison gets a nice ring on her finger, or because my parents finally get what they want." He nodded, his face a mixture of sorrow and relief. "I want to be there for you, Lily, if you'll let me." I hesitated for a moment, feeling the weight of his words. "I don't know what that looks like yet," I said finally, my voice soft but resolute. "I need time to figure out what I need first, what I want." Logan nodded again, and there was a quiet understanding between us. He stood, brushing a hand lightly against my arm. "I'll give you that space, but I'm not going anywhere." With that, he left and the room felt quieter, emptier. But it also felt more like mine. It wasn't a perfect feeling. There was no easy way out of this mess, no way to erase the last few days, or even the years of resentment and hurt that had built up. But I had something I hadn't had in a long time: control. It was mine to decide how I healed, who I let into my life, and what I would leave behind. 3 days later, I went back to my house. I stood at the front door, my hand on the handle, and paused. It had always been my space, the place I'd fought so hard to claim. But now, it felt different. It felt like a symbol of my new start, my new reality. My heart ached as I stepped inside, but it wasn't the ache of defeat, it was the ache of shedding an old skin, of walking away from a past I couldn't change. I stared at Marcus, absorbing his words. It felt surreal, like the world had shifted and I was no longer in control of it. The pain from the concussion still lingered in my head, but this was a different kind of pain, one that came from confronting the family I had always known, the family I had tried to protect, now standing accused of things I could no longer deny. Logan squeezed my hand gently. I didn't look at him, but I felt his support. His steady presence was a lifeline, pulling me away from the swirling confusion in my mind. Marcus continued, his voice calm but firm. We'll be moving forward with this, Lily. You don't have to do it alone. I'll make sure the court hears your side. My mind raced. The idea of taking my parents to court felt like something out of a dream. It was one thing to be a victim of their cruelty in private. It was another to air all of it in public, to drag it into the daylight, to make it official. The thought of confronting them in this way, really confronting them, felt suffocating. But what choice did I have? Are you sure? I asked, my voice barely a whisper. Marcus gave a small nod, understanding the weight of what I was asking. This is about accountability. You don't deserve to be treated this way, Lily, and it's not just about money or a house. It's about your safety, your well-being. The words hung in the air, heavy and final. I looked at Logan, searching his face. His eyes were filled with something I hadn't seen much before: determination, a quiet resolve. He was right there beside me, ready to stand with me through this. Imagined for myself, but then again, neither was the life I'd been living. Let's do it, I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Let's make them answer for what they've done. Logan smiled softly, his thumb brushing over my hand. You're stronger than you know, Lily. That night, I lay in bed, staring at the hospital ceiling, the distant hum of machines in the background. A part of me still felt trapped in the past, torn between the love I once hoped for from my family and the harsh reality of who they truly were. But another part of me was beginning to breathe easier, as if a weight was being slowly lifted from my chest. I had a choice now. I wasn't helpless. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and more silence from my parents. They never reached out, no apology, no attempt to make amends. It was as if I had vanished entirely from their lives the moment I stood up for myself. It became painfully clear that I had been nothing more than a pawn to them, someone to use, someone to control. Logan kept his promise. Every day, he was there, a constant source of comfort and strength. When the weight of the situation threatened to crush me, he reminded me of why this fight was necessary for me, for my future. And then came the court date. It was set for a few months later, after all the preparation. The day arrived with a kind of finality I hadn't expected. My parents sat across from me in the courtroom, their eyes locked on me, cold and unwavering. I could feel the weight of their disappointment, their anger at my betrayal. But I wasn't afraid. This was my moment, my story. When the trial began, I took the stand, my heart beat in my chest like a drum, but my voice was steady as I recounted the years of mistreatment, the manipulation, the betrayal. I told the court about the wedding day, about the attack, about the way my parents had tried to take everything from me, including the only thing I had ever truly earned, my home. The room was silent as I spoke, the weight of the words hanging in the air. And when it was over, the verdict came down. My parents were found guilty of aggravated assault, emotional abuse, and attempted coercion. They were sentenced to probation and ordered to pay restitution for the damages they caused. But more than that, I was free, finally free. The chains that had bound me to that toxic family were gone. The road ahead was still uncertain. There would be healing, both physical and emotional. But for the first time in years, I felt a glimmer of hope. Logan was right. I was stronger than I knew. I paused for a moment, gathering my thoughts, the weight of my past hanging in the air like a dense fog. The words came out slowly at first, hesitant, but then more fluid as I felt the truth coming to life. I was my parents' second child, I began, my voice steady, though my insides trembled. But I was never really their child. I was their burden, their tool. The jury listened intently as I spoke of growing up in the shadow of Madison, the perfect child who could do no wrong. I told them how I had always been the afterthought, the one who never earned affection or attention. How every decision, every effort I made to gain their approval was met with indifference or disdain. As a child, I learned early on that love wasn't something I could ask for. It was something I had to earn, and even then, it was never enough. My parents told me, explicitly and implicitly, that my worth was tied to what I could do for them. If I didn't give, I didn't deserve. I took another breath, feeling the eyes of the jury on me, their attention unwavering. Logan sat beside me, his presence like a quiet strength, and it anchored me. When Madison got everything, I was left with nothing. I continued. But I stayed silent. I tried to keep the peace because that's what they wanted. They didn't want to hear my voice unless it was saying the right thing, the thing they wanted me to say. I wasn't allowed to be angry. I wasn't allowed to question them. I wasn't allowed to have a life of my own. I didn't have a voice in that family until now. My eyes flicked toward my parents, who sat across the room, their faces tight with anger and disbelief. They hadn't expected this, they hadn't expected me to turn the tables. I knew the jury was watching their every movement. Their silence said more than their words ever could. On the day of the wedding, I said, my voice hardening as I recalled the moment, I tried to be strong. I tried to play my part, to fit into the role they had always cast me in, but that wasn't enough for them. When they didn't get what they wanted, when I didn't bend to their will, my father hit me. He attacked me with the cake stand like I was nothing more than an inconvenience to him. And my mother, she stood there doing nothing except calling me selfish. I could feel the anger rise in my chest as I spoke about that moment, but I didn't let it overwhelm me. I let it fuel my resolve. I bled, I was hurt. But the worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was the realization that all those years of being invisible to them, of being their object, their servant, their sacrifice had never been enough. They didn't care about me, they never did. I paused, letting my words sink in before adding, I am not asking for their forgiveness. I'm not asking for their approval. What I am asking for is justice. What I am asking for is accountability, because they need to know that what they did to me was wrong. I could see the reactions from the jury. Some were nodding, some were frowning. They understood, they saw the evidence, they knew the truth, just like I did. Marcus stood up then, his calm voice breaking through the silence. Your Honor, this isn't just a case about physical harm. This is about years of emotional trauma, a lifetime of it. Lily Carter was not just assaulted on that day. She was attacked in the most painful, insidious way possible by her own family, the people who were supposed to love her. I could see the impact of his words. The jury was beginning to understand the weight of the case, not just the violence of that moment, but the emotional toll that had been building up for years. The defense attorney tried to argue their side. He called my parents to testify. They stuck to their story that it was a moment of loss of control, a mistake, that they were acting out of concern for their daughter, that they had been under stress, that the property was an issue, that they were trying to do what was best for Madison. But it was too late. The truth had already come out. When it was over, the jury deliberated for less than 2 hours. The verdict was clear: guilty. My parents were convicted of aggravated assault and emotional abuse. The court awarded me a settlement for the emotional damage and pain they had caused. They would also be required to undergo therapy, but that felt almost laughable. They had never been willing to look inward before. Why would they now? As the gavel came down, I felt a strange weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't the kind of victory that made me feel triumphant. It wasn't a feeling of revenge or justice in the way I had once imagined, but it was a kind of peace. I looked over at Logan, who was watching me with a quiet pride in his eyes. He had been there for every step of this, and I knew this wasn't just about the trial, it was about reclaiming my life. After everything, I was still standing. And for the first time, I wasn't afraid of my family anymore. The sun was beginning to set as I closed the notebook, its soft leather edges worn from years of being handled, pages filled with both dreams and painful truths. I had come a long way from that girl who once wished for escape. The journey hadn't been easy, and there had been days when the weight of everything felt unbearable. But sitting there with the fading warmth of the day and Logan beside me, I realized how far I had come. I had walked through the fire of my past, and somehow I had emerged stronger. I thought about the months that had passed since the trial, since the day I had taken my parents to court. There were days when I still grappled with the remnants of their cruelty, when their voices echoed in my head like a dark refrain. But each morning, I woke up to something better, to a home that was mine, to a love that wasn't conditional, to a future that was still being written. Logan had never once questioned my decisions. He had supported me when I had needed it most, standing by my side through every tear, every moment of doubt, and now, as we sat together in our garden, he didn't just see me as the woman who had survived her past. He saw me for who I was in this moment, complete, whole, and ready to move forward. I turned to him, my heart swelling with affection. You were right, I said softly, we don't need a perfect life. He smiled, his eyes gentle and full of warmth. Just us, he agreed, pulling me closer. In that moment, I understood something deeper than I ever had before. Perfection wasn't the absence of flaws or struggles, it was the quiet moments we shared, the unconditional love, and the acceptance that we were enough, just as we were. We didn't need a grand story to validate our love. We had everything we needed right here in the small, everyday moments of life. Whether it was painting the bedroom together or tending to the garden we had nurtured with our own hands, I realized that these were the moments that mattered most. I had fought for my own voice, and now I had the freedom to speak my truth. No longer bound by the shadows of my past, I could walk forward into the life I had always deserved. A life where love wasn't something to be earned, but something freely given without expectation or strings attached. And as I sat there with Logan in the quiet of our garden, surrounded by the daisy blooms and lavender, I knew I had finally found my peace. I was no longer the forgotten daughter. I was Lily Carter, the woman who had reclaimed her life, her voice, and her future. Lily's journey is a powerful testament to resilience and self-discovery. What stands out most is her ability to break free from the toxic cycle that defined her early life, escaping the shadow of her family and the suffocating expectation of sacrificing her own happiness for their approval. Her path isn't just one of survival, it's a story of reclaiming her voice, her sense of self, and ultimately her peace. Her story also emphasizes the healing that comes from forgiveness, but not to be mistaken for forgetting or allowing the past to continue its hold. Forgiveness, in this context, was a crucial step in freeing herself from her family's legacy. And now, by giving back through the nonprofit she co-founded, she continues the cycle of empowerment, offering others the same courage she found within herself. The idea that we can rewrite our stories, no matter how painful the past, is something so many can relate to. There's a freedom that comes when we stop letting the judgments of others, especially those close to us, dictate our worth. Lily's strength came from her realization that her past doesn't have to define her future, and neither does anyone else's version of her. It's inspiring to think that no matter where we start, we have the power to shape our own endings. Like Lily, many of us can find peace, purpose, and love in the places we least expect, often within ourselves. Her story gives hope to anyone feeling trapped or silenced, a reminder that healing is possible and new beginnings can be just around the corner. What an incredibly emotional and empowering journey she's been on. It makes you reflect on the ways we sometimes hold on to toxic relationships or past mistakes, thinking we don't deserve more. But we do. Just as Lily did, we can all make the choice to live on our terms and move forward in a healthier, freer way.